Hey everyone, welcome to SEC Tea. I am Sierra Clark. We spill all the greatest tea in this great conference. But first, make sure you download the app today from our friends over there at UNDERDOG and use the promo code SECU to score $75 in bonus bets, entries, and when you play for your first $5. So great stuff there with UNDERDOG. Special guest with me today from the Baton Rouge Advocate, Reed Darcey. He covers all things LSU. He is the beat writer for the LSU women's basketball team. Tigers playing really well right now. They moved up in the rankings. They're ranked 6th right now, I believe. And they had a huge win over number 2 Texas, which was a really big game because it's just so crazy how competitive this conference is. But they took down Texas 70-65, and a real big key for the Tigers here was defense. And they did it against that tough Texas team. Michaela Williams from LSU finished the game with 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 steals. And LSU, like I said, put on a defensive show, but they forced 17 turnovers. Was this the best performance defensively that you have seen from the Tigers?
Well, Sierra, it's been quite a while, I would say, since they've done something like this against a team that good. It was the first time that LSU has beaten a team like South Carolina or Texas. Think about the top teams in the SEC since Kim Mulkey has been here. So it's her 5th year now, and they finally got that win. I think it was just huge for them. And the way that these LSU Texas games always shake out, they're always really physical. They're always really low scoring. Both teams really try to play good defense, and they really try to be physical with you around the rim and on the glass. And what really that I was impressed by LSU so much was, number one, how well they defended, but number 2, how well they rebounded. LSU won the glass, I believe, 44-35, and they also grabbed 19 offensive rebounds, which is crazy impressive against a team like Texas with all that size and all that physicality. So rebounding was kind of a struggle for LSU at times at the start of SEC play when they lost to Kentucky and Vanderbilt, but they turned it around pretty quickly, and they put together a really good rebounding performance against Texas. And I think that's probably the number one reason why they won.
I want to go back to the beginning of conference play because they did lose their first 2 games, like you mentioned, lost to Kentucky, lost to Vanderbilt, and there was so much hype around this LSU team. They got Flau'jae Johnson back, and they went undefeated in non-conference play. And so what was everyone saying, especially the LSU basketball fans, when this team got off to a cold start? Was it like, oh my gosh, they are not living up to the hype at all? Or, oh no, it's going to take them some time to adjust?
I think it was more of the latter. It was going to take some time to adjust, especially because they played such a soft non-conference schedule. That's how they always do it. That's how Kim Mulkey has really always done it since she's been here. And it's really by design. Like, number one, the SEC is so tough, so she doesn't want to overload that non-conference schedule with a lot of tough teams because she knows she's going to play lots and lots of difficult matchups once January and February and March rolls around. So she wants them in November and December to build all kinds of confidence, to work out the kinks, and she wants to figure out exactly what they need to improve upon before they get to the games that really matter. And so we know what happened with Kentucky and Vanderbilt. 1, LSU did not defend very well. 2, they did not rebound very well. But the thing is that they lost both of those games in the last couple minutes. Really, they were very close games. Came down to the last 2 or 3 possessions or so, and those are 2 really good teams. So LSU did not play its very best brand of basketball in those games, and it was still right there. So I think it just showed that once they figured out the possession game, once they started to figure out how they could play defense and how they could rebound a little bit better, I think they showed that they could turn it around pretty quickly after they did that. And I think that was the prevailing sentiment among LSU fans, was they just needed to get better in a couple key areas, and then they could get back on track and start this season off on a better note.
And when Kim Mulkey was hired at LSU in 2021, she's a huge name in the women's basketball world. She's a Louisiana native. She was, of course, at Baylor for a very long time, extremely successful there. And when she came to LSU, what was everyone saying when that happened? And was that a person that LSU fans always wanted to coach there? Or was it kind of just more of a surprise? Wow, Kim Mulkey's coming here. How did that go?
Well, I think people were very excited. Number one, they were obviously they know Kim Mulkey, and she's obviously one of the best I guess sports figures from the state of Louisiana, if you think about just any sport overall. So there was a lot of excitement there, but it had been a while since the LSU women's basketball program had really been in the national conversation. You really had to go back to when Simone Augustus and Sylvia Fowles were playing under Sue Gunner. In the early to mid 2000s to really when they were competing for national championships. So I think there's a lot of fans out there who their introduction to women's basketball was through Kim Mulkey. And so because she came in right away, she got a good team. She recruited a lot of good players and really turned it into this fun kind of spectacle kind of show. I think she reintroduced a lot of folks around here, a lot of folks in Baton Rouge, a lot of LSU fans to women's basketball and showed them how fun it can be. So there was a lot of excitement there. I don't think anybody, including Kim Mulkey, expected them to win as quickly as they did win the national title in her second year. And obviously it took off as like a rocket ship since then. So she really came back because she wanted to do good for her state and wanted to take on one final challenge in her career and have one good chapter to end things on. And I think she's obviously doing a pretty good job so far. So we'll see how many more championships she gets. Maybe she gets one, maybe she gets another two. I just think as long as she'll be LSU's coach, she'll have her team in those conversations. And, it just doesn't take much to be knocking on the door for you to step through at some point.
And what's it like covering Kim Mulkey? I mean, I just love watching her press conferences because she has these great one-liners. And I'm like, where does she get this from?
It's a lot of fun, Sierra. Like, I really appreciate how Kim is very honest and forthcoming with what she's actually thinking. It's good as a reporter to have a coach like that. Her teams are always good. They play a fun brand of basketball. They always go deep into the tournament. And on top of that, they're also just really entertaining. She's an entertaining figure herself. Her players, they tend to have some outsized personalities to them. And it starts with her. It's just that I'd much rather cover a coach who speaks her mind and says what she's really thinking than one who just kind of speaks in platitudes and just says just nothing but cliches. That's who she is. That's how she was raised. That's how she's always been. And I don't think she's going to change any of that for anybody else, no matter what anybody says about her. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air. It's really fun just to not know what she's going to say or when she's going to come at you in the press conference. But again, it's just a lot of fun to cover her and her team and just to see all the fun that they have on the court. I think it translates to the fans, and the fans appreciate it as well.
What was the game that it was back when Angel Reese was on the team and there was some scruffling on the court or something? And then she goes, I bet that girl wouldn't have pushed Angel Reese. I was like,
yeah, that's a classic example. That's not the PR thing to say. That's not the sanitized version of what you're supposed to say in that moment. But Kim Mulkey doesn't really play by the rules. So that's an example of her just saying what's on her mind, and consequences be damned,
Yeah. What is your favorite Kim Mulkey moment?
Ooh, my favorite Kim Mulkey moment. Gosh, I would say just it's kind of interesting. I think it was probably when recently I would say if you watch the Texas game, this was a good moment for me. If you watch the Texas game and towards the end, Michaela Williams hit that fadeaway three that kind of sealed it for LSU. And if you look at Kim, she kind of just looks up at the air and then just like collapses onto the scorer's table and just like buries her head in the scorer's table. It's a really funny clip, and it goes to show like she's so just like emotive and expressive on the sidelines like that, and you could just see the relief wash over her at that point. And most coaches, they try to keep their emotions in check. They try to stay composed. They try to be those stoic leaders that they want to have this ideal of, but Kim doesn't do any of that. She's running and jumping and kicking around on the sidelines, and it's almost like a little sideshow to the game just to see how she reacts to things. You see a play happen, and then you look over to Mulkey, and she reacts a certain way, and you can learn a thing or two about what happened in the game just based on watching her reactions. So that's one of my favorite things to do when I'm covering the games. I learned that pretty quickly. Just watch to see how Mulkey reacts, and you can learn quite a bit about what actually happened.
Well, there you go, y'all. If you've never watched an LSU basketball game, Kim Mulkey is your reason to watch. Obviously, the team is great, but if you're not an LSU fan, just give it a try and watch with what Kim Mulkey does. Another funny thing she did was when they played Kentucky. Was it Kentucky? Yeah, it was the Kentucky game at home. And Lane Kiffin comes out, and this is the night of the Sugar Bowl, or around the time the Sugar Bowl was being played with Ole Miss in Georgia, and it was in New Orleans, and people were like, "Oh, is Lane Kiffin going to show up to the Sugar Bowl?" He's like, "No, I'm going to the women's basketball game." And then Kim Mulkey comes out hand in hand with Lane Kiffin, just like,
oh, they're holding hands walking down the tunnel. that was funny to me. I thought that must have been a little awkward, but I don't know. But it's just only Kim, man. Only Kim would usher Lane Kiffin out onto the floor holding his hand like that.
And I know that Lane Kiffin was that big hire and making way more than Kim Mulkey does. But personally, I believe she wears the pants in that relationship that is called LSU athletics.
Yeah, she runs the show. She's really become a representative of LSU with all the winning she's done, and just the way that she's from here. Not many coaches at LSU right now are from Louisiana. LSU gets these people from all over the country, but she's from here, and I think that gives her a little extra authority to speak on behalf of the athletic department and to weigh in on certain things. She's a legend, she's on Mount Rushmore, and so I think that makes perfect sense that she's the one to, I guess, quote unquote, introduce Lane Kiffin to the LSU fans like she did, because she's the old guard, and she represents a lot of what LSU is and what their fans are all about.
Yeah, and speaking of Kiffin, you were obviously in Baton Rouge in New Orleans, or from New Orleans. And when Brian Kelly was fired, were people mentioning Lane Kiffin's name as a potential person they wanted to coach the team, and did they think that would happen?
It came up pretty quickly, yeah. I think Lane Kiffin was at the top of a lot of people's lists. We obviously know now in hindsight that he was at the top of LSU's list. We just didn't know exactly if it could really work out. I remember everyone at the time was asking me, like, do you think that Lane Kiffin can come? And I'm like, okay, does LSU really want to wait around until he gets done with Ole Miss's playoff run? Probably not. That's probably not feasible. So I thought, yeah, there could be mutual interest between the two sides, but just how the calendar is structured, it probably wouldn't be able to work out, because LSU needed a coach in place by the first week of December, kind of at the latest, and that's before the playoff even started. So I never really considered the possibility that he would be willing to walk away from that playoff run and be willing to walk away from Ole Miss in order to take the LSU job. But again, that's Lane Kiffin. Nobody's ever done that before. He became the first as part of what makes him such a compelling figure and such an interesting guy. Like he made that unprecedented decision to leave behind a playoff team, and that was his decision. And now he's the coach at LSU. So I always thought that it made a lot of sense. Just the one barrier was the calendar and Ole Miss's playoff run. But once we realized that wasn't much of an obstacle, that Lane Kiffin wasn't willing to let that hold him back, then it's like, yeah, it's probably going to happen. It makes a lot of sense for him, and obviously it makes a lot of sense for LSU. They had him at the top of their list.
And Lane Kiffin is just known for leaving his jobs in a very messy way. Obviously, we saw what happened with Ole Miss. At Tennessee, he just left out of nowhere. He was fired off the tarmac at USC. And then Bama, he also left in a messy way when he was an assistant there. Are LSU fans prepared for him to leave in a messy way again, if that happens?
Not yet. Not right now. Right now, I think they're still in the honeymoon phase. They probably can't think or say anything negative about him. Give it a couple of years, and maybe fans will start thinking about that. I don't think they're there yet. Lane Kiffin, he has to. The thing about people in Louisiana, they're very affectionate. We want to be loved, we want to be appreciated, and we want people to show how much they love us and our culture and our food. And so I think Lane Kiffin, a lot of it he can solve by winning, but he could really help himself by embracing the culture and embracing the state and embracing the people and trying to be one of us, I would say. And I think if he does that, then he can become a beloved figure around here who's around for a long time. But again, it all comes down to winning. If he wins, then that kind of solves pretty much anything. But it doesn't. If he doesn't win, then you could probably start to see how this kind of becomes a messy exit. I think historically with Lane Kiffin, you haven't been in it with him for a long time. You've been in it with him for a good time, and that's what LSU is really hoping to be in it with him, and hoping he brings a championship. Brings him back to the playoff. It's too early to say if this team that he's building right now can do that, but I think it's off to a pretty good start with what they built in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and you talk about Louisiana and embracing the culture. You're from New Orleans as well. When Brian Kelly when he tried to pull off that fake accent, what did everyone say? Because in Louisiana, it is a place that's just very different, especially it's very different from the rest of the South. Honestly, I live in Arkansas. And what was that reaction? And throughout Brian Kelly's tenure, it seemed like people were like, okay, this guy does not fit in.
Yeah, you can always feel that kind of distance between LSU and Brian Kelly, and I think fans were willing to give him a shot even after the whole country Southern accent fiasco at the basketball game. I think they were really willing to give him a shot and try to see what he could do. But the moment it really crystallized for me is the press conference after LSU beat Florida this year when he went after the reporter who asked him about the offense and asked him about the run game. That's kind of, to me, when it kind of hit me that he didn't really understand the standards here, and he didn't really understand why and how his team wasn't meeting those standards. Because it couldn't run the ball, it wasn't being as physical and it wasn't being as hard-nosed, I think, as this program has been historically, and what a lot of fans are proud of, with this LSU team. It really has been a program historically that's won on toughness and defense and physicality and running the football. And give him credit, his team in 2023 had one of the best offenses in school history. It was exciting with Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. Yeah, and once those guys left, he struggled to rebuild it, and I think it all kind of fell apart from there. So I think overall, the LSU fans, they were hopeful that he could make it work. They recognized that he was a good coach, but overall, I don't think he really understood what it took to win at a place like LSU, and understood the value of the fans and how they held him to such a high standard, and that he was falling short of that standard.
And Louisiana it's just a sports state. Sports are huge there. You know this more than I do, of course. You're from there. But did all of that kind of play a role into you deciding to work in sports journalism? How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, so from a young age, my earliest sports memories are watching the first couple Drew Brees, Sean Payton Saints teams, right? And so I think I fell in love with it from there. I remember watching the NFC Championship game. I think it was 2007 when they played Chicago, lost up there. And so I guess my love of sports kind of grew from there. And then once I got into high school and college, I figured out that I not only love sports, but I also love writing about sports. And so from there, I went to LSU. I got on with the LSU student newspaper and started writing more about sports, started covering LSU sports. And so from there, I really figured out that I liked it, and I wanted to improve at it, and I wanted to get better. And so I think it's been a pretty rewarding few years. I was fortunate enough to get on with the Advocate to get an internship while I was in college, and that led to this full-time job covering the women's basketball team with Kim Mulkey. So it's been a blast so far. It's really fun. I really enjoyed my job, and I'm very lucky, certainly, that I have it and that I can get to write about sports for a living. It doesn't really feel real at this point, but I try to remind myself every day of that and just be grateful for it,
That's awesome. And where can everyone find your work, and where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can go to theadvocate.com or NOLA.com to read our stuff. And then I'm on Twitter @ByReadDarcey, @BY, and then Read Darcey. I post most of my stories on there. So
awesome. And he will be covering that game against Oklahoma coming up with the LSU women's basketball team. Lots of fun stuff there. LSU, bunch of teams play this weekend. great time to bet on sports. So what are you waiting for? Just download the Underdog app today and use the promo code SECU to score $75 in bonus entries. I'm not sure what I'm betting yet, but I know I will be using the app. You must be 18 and up, 19 and up in Alabama and Nebraska, and 19 and up in Colorado for just some games, 21 and up in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/web/play and get terms _DFS_.html for your details. Offer is not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Just call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncgambling.org. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. They'll help you out there, guys, if you have a problem, all right? But thank you, Reed, so much for joining me today. LSU women's basketball has a fun season coming up ahead, and just support women's basketball. Read his stuff. So go to the games. Women's basketball is just taking off, and you don't want to miss out on it. All right, Reed, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Sierra.